Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. I'm Heather Burnt Santee. Three of my favorite people to talk to are on the show today. Mike Huber. Hi, Mike.
Hello.
And Lizz Nolasco. Hi, Liz.
Hi.
And Sam Balch. Hi, Sam.
Howdy.
So we're going to continue conversations about Lilian Katz in this episode in our Very Clever Cats Ladies series. As and also just because we should be talking about her. She was right, and we just should have been listening to her sooner. The article we're talking about is called Distinctions Between Academic and Intellectual Goals for Young Children. The version that we're discussing is from a 2015 issue of Exchange magazine. But this actually goes back to the 90s, like so much of her stuff does. Liz and I recently recorded about a chapter in a book, and this was also a chapter in that same book from 93, I think. Like I said, it's from Exchange. There's also a blog post version of it on Defending the Early Years website if people need multiple ways to find it. Do we want to talk about Lilian Katz at all, or just jump right into the article? Do any of you want to say anything about?
One, I will say that if she had just written this article, she should be remembered and revered.
Yes.
But then she's done so many things.
Yeah.
And that I know for me, the sort of it goes along with what we're going to be talking about, but the project approach or like investigating the young investigators and all of that was such a big influence, or and I was excited because I actually got to tell her how much her
you
work
did?
meant. Yeah, and I was in the middle of and I know my audience is here, but I was in the middle of doing a ball investigation with my preschoolers, and I was telling her about it because this would have been 2001, and I was using video, which at the time was not easy.
Wow.
There were no, like, it wasn't like you had video on your phone. But I was videoing the kids using balls, and then we'd watch it and like figure out why don't you throw a yoga ball, or why do you why don't you kick a bowling ball? So she was just like, I can't do her accent, but she's like, oh, that's so interesting. Can you send me some documentation? I'd love to see it. Never followed through, but it was really exciting to like, like it was just like, oh my God, so so it turns out that just talking to people and not being too embarrassed works well. And then you get stories afterwards.
That's right.
But it was really cool the way she had that intellectual interest. And like, oh yes, video could do this, that, and then she starts thinking like, what's the potential here, so she's doing exactly what she wants preschoolers to do.
Cool. Anybody else met her? I've not met her.
I've not met her.
I don't get to meet any of these cool.
I've referenced her work a lot.
Yeah, me too.
I think she wrote about the developmental stages of preschool teachers in like the 70s.
That's one that Liz and I did recently.
I love that, and I talk about it all the time, and I think in that frame all the time, and I'm shocked at how many people have never interacted with it, given that it's from the 70s.
I know, that's what I mean.
Why are we not? Is it because she's a woman? Why are we not? Is it because she's not a dead man? Like, why are we not listening to the things she has said and continues to say?
Well, we're doing our part here with this series, and letting Mike be an honorary Cats lady with us.
I've always been a Cats lady.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let me get a quote here from the beginning. Excuse me. She, of course, describes the trend of focusing on academics to get children, quote unquote, ready for school. And she writes, this debate about appropriate preschool curricula is based on a misleading dichotomy between offering young children formal academic instruction versus child-centered play or simple activities such as cutting and pasting. I suggest that a more useful way of looking at the choices in preschool and kindergarten curriculum approaches is to think about distinctions between academic and intellectual goals and activities, especially during the early years, as well as the important place of spontaneous play. We're still having this argument. There's if intellectual conversation, if we're able to make the distinction, and maybe that's the argument no one's having anymore that we need to bring back, but this idea of, is it play, is it academics, are we getting them ready enough for school? It seems like we've been doing this for decades and it's not working, or we wouldn't still be having all these conversations about it. So maybe it's time to try something different. And maybe this article is a good starting place for us all.
I think what struck me from just that introduction when I was reading it was, I feel like we've changed the language of the dichotomy. I feel like the word intellect has been completely thrown out in favor of social emotional skills. And I feel like there's such a heavy cognitive piece to social emotional learning that we ignore.
Yes.
And there's such an expansive definition to intellect that, again, it just gets left aside because we're not doing academics, or we are doing academics, right?
Yeah.
But it's just the goal posts move and practice stays the same.
Yeah. Yeah. And social emotional in so many contexts, as you said, Liz, it's removed from the cognitive piece of it. We know it's all interrelated. It's become almost in some context a use of euphemism for behavior management.
Oh, absolutely.
And
it ignores so many, particularly neurodivergent kids who have great cognitive empathy, but less affective empathy. And
yeah. Did you start to say something there, Sam?
I did. I would say, not in many contexts, I would say in most contexts, when people say social emotional learning, what they mean is behavior management. And what they mean when they say behavior management is children who are quiet.
Right. And still.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, like any good kind of academic piece. This isn't exactly research, but like any good scholarly conversation, I'll say we have to define our terms, right? So let's talk about how she defined academic goals, and let's just talk about that section for a second, and then we'll go on to intellectual goals. So she does give like academic goals are those concerned with acquiring small, discrete bits of information, usually related to pre-literacy skills, the alphabet, counting, numbers, talking about the calendar and the days of the week, all that stuff that we sure still do.
Yup.
So what, from that section, what stood out to you guys?
I think in some ways, well, there's two things that relate, but that whole idea of small, discrete bits of information, that's a researcher's dream, right? Oh, I can easily say, do this, and this one thing that I'm focused on will happen.
Yeah.
And it'd be fine if we weren't talking about human beings, but when we're talking about human beings, that is completely the wrong way to do research.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that's one of the reasons that we hold so tightly to these discrete academic goals, because they're easy to measure. They're easy to say, I can plan for that, and then I can measure it, I can assess it, so I can prove something about it. And
you're showing growth, like, oh, look, they grew in this one little thing.
Yeah.
So yeah. And I think that's where the whole alphabet, and Stacy's like talk about, you can teach a letter of the week, and that week, or maybe even the next week, they can say a lot about it. And so if you test it, you can say, look what happened. And if you tested 8 months from then, there wouldn't be much retained. And so that's where, these little bits, discrete bits of information, if they don't connect to anything, I mean, brain development, we've known this, for 40 years with brain development, and hundreds of years if we followed actually just the, women who raised kids, that discrete bits of information don't mean anything, and no one retains that. That's not how the brain works.
It's a good
Inside
potty
Out
trick.
would tell us that too.
Yeah.
Yes, good potty trick. Yeah.
Yeah. What was I gonna? So she talked about worksheets, drills, and other kinds of exercises, and I think we've become clever enough as a field to move away from, most of the time, I know there's still a lot of early childhood places that do worksheets, but at least in conversations, we can talk about this in a way that makes it seem like, oh yeah, we realize worksheets and drills are not the way to do this anymore. But the expectation and the, like, we changed the name, but not the game, right? We're still, calendar time is a drill. It's, you know, letter of the week or zoophonics or whatever you're doing. Those are
what
drills.
What color is this?
Yeah, just those quizzes in the moment.
Yeah. And I would also say that in a lot of the public school context for early childhood, specifically the special education context, so under IDEA, when you have a documented disability and you have services, it's overrun with just drills and this focus on like you were talking about, like any little piece that you can then prove, aha, they have done it. Whether they have actually retained that or whether this is how the unique child will retain this information and enjoy interacting with this information is completely off the table, because at that point it is all about results and what you are showing in the quarterly IEP meetings or whatnot.
We confuse performance with learning.
Right.
And I think or performance with teaching. I mean, it goes both ways.
And I think a lot of that insidiousness has come down from the just insurmountable pressure of productivity, both on non-educational pursuits, then on teachers themselves to be productive and to have productive lessons and to have a productive classroom, which then trickles down to the children of, well, are you being productive? And what I mean by productive is, can I measure what you have done?
Yeah. Where's Tiffany to come in with the capitalist rant?
Well, that's the thing too, right? If you're gonna apply for any sort of money, like, you need to show these little discrete things. And like the IEP is a good example of the IDEA Act itself is great. This idea of now we're going to chunk little things and not treat this person. We're basically not treating the person as human now.
Right.
We're treating this person as diagnoses, and here's the thing, we're going to work on this thing. And I've been seeing this a lot lately. So the last 8 months. So, our center is new, had this child start, non-speaking autistic child. There's an IEP. And it listed things, deficits such as holding, often holds little objects, and just, randomly organizes them.
There's literally a pen in my hand right now.
Right. Well, we can work on that. Let's make a new goal that Sam will no longer hold pens when trying to have a conversation. But I mean, I just kind of
be empty 3 of 5 times.
But I just kind of use that information of, oh, okay, so we had like a little treasure box of little fairies and gnomes that when she comes in the morning, she like greets the person at the desk, and she hands her the treasure box. Initially, it was because she brought an iPad with her. That was how mom got her to transition, and so they traded. But after a few weeks of that, she never brought the iPad. Like, mom also kind of relaxed. But then the special ed teacher's like, oh, since she's been coming to your center, she's not dysregulated when she arrives at our program and all these things. And it's like, yeah, because we're not treating her as chunks. We're treating her as a person.
Because we recognize what things legitimately do not make a difference.
Yeah.
Wait, when you let someone self-regulate, they appear more regulated? Hold on.
Right. And she gets to explore in her own way, right? So mostly what she does is and she can do, like, she likes to do watercolors. And so even if it's not time to do watercolors and it's in the cabinet, she'll go over, grab the magnet, open up the cabinet, reach in, grab the thing, close everything, go back, get some water, gets the paper. Like, she's just, doing everything on her own. And it's like, look at all of the things she's capable of. Instead of, oh, she wasn't sitting down at circle time or whatever,
Yeah, I think that's a really good segue to move into the intellectual skills part of this now, because because now I can't remember why it was a good segue.
It just is. It really is.
It's a really good segue.
It's a great segue.
I just mean,
and you made it even better.
Oh my God. Yeah. Anyway, okay. So then we move into when she's talking about and defining intellectual goals. She says, on the other hand, they address the life of the mind in its fullest sense, including a range of aesthetic and moral sensibilities. The concept of intellectual emphasizes reasoning, hypothesizing, predicting, a quest for understanding. And I'm going to read this too. Intellectual lives actually began at birth as the infant strives to make sense of the surrounding events and responses to others in their actions. And if I act quickly, maybe I remember now that academic goals really seem to be focused on the child as a deficit. That's why this was going to be a segue. That's why it was a segue. Thank you all for staying with me.
Ding, ding.
I did it.
I
did it.
Think of it as like academic goals are so focused on the input, right? What I am inputting into the child's brain. But intellectual goals are entirely focused on the output of the child.
What's already happening in the child's brain.
Exactly. What are they already outputting? What are they already interested in? How do I continue that interest with them while also honoring all of the strengths that they are bringing? The fact that this child can get down the watercolor, keep an area clean, perform an activity she enjoys. Great. What else can we do here?
Yeah. And we're still, I talk about this all the time. We're still being a teacher in that moment. I think that's another thing that makes it so hard to switch from this kind of drilling of academic chunks. Let's just call it blowing academic chunks. We feel like that makes me a teacher because I've got the goals and I'm in charge and I'm doing the plans and I'm measuring. Mike and Sam, what you just talked about is absolutely, you're still having a role of a teacher and using your expertise to support.
Yeah, the phrase I've been using is your job is to create conditions for learning.
Yeah.
That's what I was literally just going to say, is that teaching is maintaining an environment for learning. That's really, which doesn't sound as like fun and sexy, right? When you say it, or when you're trying to convince someone of how
better than blowing chunks. Sure.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, speak for yourself.
Oh my God! Someone say something quick.
But I think when you see, and that's where documentation can be really helpful for the adults. I think there's reason to do it for the kids too.
Sure.
But to show what kids can do when you let them do it, and give them the resources, the time, the space, and co-regulation when they need it.
Yeah.
It's like they do so much. It's like, oh, I thought all they could do was color in the apple and the bumblebee. It's like, what do you know? They can actually go get their own watercolors, or they can make a playground for worms or whatever. It's like there's all this stuff that people miss.
Yeah.
If they, only focus on things that are so isolated that they won't mean much, and it'll deflate kids. And I almost jumped to a different section of the book.
Not yet.
And like she says, just in the next paragraph, I think, where she talks about academic skills in service of their intellectual pursuits. It's not that the academic skills are absent here. It's that they're initiated by the child. They're curious. The child has that curiosity and a reason to use those skills.
Yeah, we've been using that line.
One-to-one correspondence.
Yeah,
that's what we've been using at my center when parents ask, "Oh, but aren't they going to learn the alphabet?" It's like, "Oh yeah, but we don't teach." And I was misquoting. Now I can't remember exactly what I was saying, but oh yeah, but we don't teach the academic skills at the expense of intellectual ones.
Yeah,
and it was just this real quick line. And then if they want to know more,
I was going to say, what kind of a response are you getting to that line? Do they stop on it?
Mostly it's been like, oh, okay. And so, but that's where documentation is going to be helpful to then show the parent, oh my gosh, look at the thing they were doing. And we're starting to really see that, right? Because some of it is teachers are learning a new way too. So, and we've been using, oh my God, it's all Lilian Katz. We've been using this idea that we are in survival mode as a center. Right. So I haven't really been able to coach teachers the first 6 months, because I was just helping them get through the day.
Right.
And now we're at that point now, we're okay, we've got the staff that wants to be here, and they're running their classrooms. They don't need to keep asking questions on really basic things, because they know, we put a shelf in where there needed to be one or whatever. And so now I can start coaching these things. So now it's like, oh, look at all of the things they were making and how they are starting to notice the, each other's names and be able to be interested in the start sounds of everyone's name in the classroom. And so then you start sending those stories to parents and it's like, oh, I get it. They are learning letters in this other way.
Yeah.
Because they want to write notes to their friends.
Yeah, I've been including with my students more and more the work the Lego Foundation has done on neuroscience and learning through play. And they have in various publications, they talk about the 5 characteristics of of an engaging kind of playful activity in terms of brain development, and meaningful is one of them. Like the experience needs to be meaningful. And so I gave students, it was in a discussion board, and I asked them to talk about what that might look like in like pre-literacy work with young children. And about half of them had just straight out, I'm teaching them how to hold a pen and I'm teaching them to write their names. And I was like, how does that fit this meaningful piece that we've talked about? And I was like, well, it's meaningful because they need to do that later. And so I'm so glad that I'm back with this article now, because she says the children should be able to sense the purposefulness of their efforts to master a variety of academic skills. And that's kind of what you just described with now they want to write. Now they see the meaning and the use of it.
Right. Yeah.
And we've done what we needed to do to support them as they got there, when it was meaningful for them. Not, well, it's meaningful because my director says I have to have something planned for every learning standard.
Right.
So that's meaningful.
It's meaningful because they'll go to kindergarten sometime.
Yes.
So they're gonna need to know how to do it.
Yeah.
I have a good story about that. Oh, go
Excellent.
I'll remember mine.
Like my favorite story about like meaningful academic moments that end up that are truly intellectual pursuits is at a school I previously taught at. There were a bunch of kids. We would go to the library, and the kids loved being at the library. And they noticed that only the teachers would check out the books, and they would say, well, can I get some? And so we asked the librarians that were there, and they said, in order to check out a book, you have to be able to write your name, because you have to be able to sign your name. And immediately there were 4 children that are like, I must learn this. I need the books. I have to learn how to write the name. And they spent weeks practicing this, figuring it out, helping each other write their names. And then, we went into the library and they got their library cards. And not everyone was interested, right?
Yeah.
We didn't force everyone to do it, because there were some for whom they were like, this is not meaningful. I do not care. But for the group that it was so powerful for them to then say, look at this thing I can do that has now afforded me such a wealth.
Opened the world up. Yeah. How old were those children? Did you say that? Did I miss that?
No, they were 4.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Mike's,
I'll tell. Okay. I'm going to tell one really quick story, but then another story. But they're both quick, I swear. But the first one was just a few weeks ago. Let me wait. No. Aren't you glad you invited me? No. So
every day,
always.
Somebody wanted a chair. Like one of the kids, they were playing apartment, and one of the kids was like, "Oh, I need a chair," because they're fighting over. They all wanted a blue chair, and I said, "Oh, I can go get you one." And I went over and I grabbed a clipboard with a piece of paper and brought the blue chair and said, "Okay, I need you to sign for that." And knocked on the apartment door. Someone ordered a chair. It's like, "Oh, I just need you to sign for this." And then pretty soon they all wanted to order things and then sign for it. Right? And it's just that example of even without thing. But the one I really wanted to bring up, because it also has to do with Lilian Katz, was several years ago. I was doing a pumper truck investigation. This is just as much influenced by Judy Harris-Helm as Lilian Katz, because Judy Harris-Helm continued Lilian Katz's work and really talked about get specific. So I went from doing a fire truck, what I would have done as a fire truck investigation was the pumper truck. And we went to a fire station and they were about to give us a tour, and kids just pulled out clipboards like, how many ladders does your pumper truck have? And then, we got all these photos. I just asked a parent to come along and photo every inch of the pumper truck. And then we made printed them out and put them around a shoebox. So it had that 3D thing. And then the kids were going to build a pumper truck for the finale of the investigation to show what they learned. And this one child who had never shown any interest in writing, was, helping with other things. And this is more a Judy Harris Helm thing. What I did was we made a checklist of what we would need on our model of the fire truck, a pumper truck, sorry. They did it. And of course, they all got interested in one thing and went and did it. And so the next day, like, hey, let's look. Our checklist said this. Okay, which things did we do? Okay, we used some silver. You know, we used aluminum foil for the, like, I don't know what you call it, the valves or whatever. And we used some red. Okay, but we don't have any ladders. We don't have that, you know. And so they did some more. They're like, oh, and then they did some more. And then we did it a third time. And even I was like, you know, really, like a third time with this one thing. And this girl who had never shown an interest in letters is looking at it, looking at the photo, and she's suddenly, wait, she grabs a piece of paper. And since she didn't write much, she had to write it on like an 11 by 17 paper and wrote, keep 500 feet back. And she's like, oh, there's a sign on the back of the truck. And she copied all of the letters. I'd never seen her write a letter. And she taped it on the back. So the whole thing was bigger than a shoebox, but like, you know, not that big. And then the paper was
keep 500 feet back.
But I thought that was like a perfect example of she suddenly had a reason why she needed to write. I mean, much like the library card. But I just remember that one of like, oh, like there, you know, like this really does just like spark kids in a way.
Yeah, and you can't guess what that spark's going to be, right? That's,
exactly.
That's our hubris to think I can guess what a child will learn based on something I plan and I'm completely in charge of.
Right.
Instead of this, how can I see where they already are and follow that in a meaningful way? Were you going to say something, Sam? Sorry.
I was going to say, like a really small part of your story was how you had a parent take the pictures of the truck.
Oh, yeah.
And I just think that is such a powerful way to have families in partnership and to also show them the difference, but also relationship between academic and intellectual goals.
Right. Right.
Because to get them so involved in something that might seem to them like, this is extraordinarily silly, why are we doing this? But then to say, oh, with these pictures, the children are going to have every detail. They will not miss anything. They're going to really investigate this pumper truck. I feel like that also kind of brings them along on the learning journey of, oh, there is more to this than I might, you know, just see at the beginning, because many, if not most of our parents are not trained to see that.
Right.
And that's
the checklist thing is just firefighters are community helpers. Check. There's our academic goal.
We done did it.
Oh my gosh. Liz, have you been waiting for a pause?
Oh no, I've mostly been enjoying the stories. Sorry.
Oh, okay. All right then. I want to spend some time. Page 2 of the article is my most marked up page. I mean, I guess it also has the most text. But anyway, I also want to make sure we talk about. There's 2 quotes here that I want to. First, she says, children of very low income families may not have been read to or have held a pencil at home, but I suggest that it is a good idea to assume that they too have lively minds. And that made me cry a little bit with our current discourse about achievement gaps and the children that are most identified as being lacking, and then they don't get play because they need all these academic drills. You know, especially having just had a conversation with Ijuma Jordan about this. I was
just going to say, I know I heard somebody talking recently.
Yeah, she wrote a piece, Play in Equity. It's both an article and it's part of the new DAP book. Anyway, just that I suggest it's a good idea to assume, like, such a gentle scold.
I was gonna say, so gentle the way she put it, because I would be like, listen up, bozos.
Right.
Stop assuming that all kids have interesting thoughts.
Yeah.
That's you being racist.
Yeah.
And have you ever heard her voice? Because she's got this British accent too. So it's like you can just
very, very, she's probably pouring us some tea while she's
exactly
making this suggestion. You know, but so there's that poem. There's that poem that goes around on social media at the beginning of every school year because I didn't have a pencil or something like that. And I think that there really is an element of talking about the child who doesn't get read to at home, the child who doesn't have a pencil, in such an exploitative way. that this idea that, they probably have lively minds too. Just bring it back, reel yourself in a little bit.
And they probably get breakfast for their younger kids, or like there's all these things that middle class kids aren't expected to do, and other kids do all the time, and yet we haven't made those academic goals, so therefore
functionally we need to punish those children. They are not permitted a childhood.
Right.
But it's for their own good. It's for their own
good. It's kind
of
also their fault that they're poor. Bootstraps anyone?
Yeah.
This is sarcasm. I had someone not get my sarcasm the other day, and I wanted to crawl into a hole, so I just really feel like I should say
let's announce it. Yep. I think our listeners are pretty adept at
I do too.
Picking up something on the sarcasm. Usually. And then the other one I wanted to make sure that I brought in was she talks about second, while intellectual dispositions may be weakened or even damaged by excessive and premature formal instruction, they are also not likely to be strengthened by many of the trivial, if not banal, activities frequently offered in childcare, preschool, and kindergarten programs. So I do really talk a lot about her idea of damaged dispositions. Like, I think that's a real danger here. But I love that she was bold enough to call out those other things we do that
the stuff you do is dumb. Like, yes, queen,
and I've done all of those things. Like, I've done all of those things. Yes.
We only have so many hours in a day. Why are we forcing children into sitting down and drawing lines between uppercase and lowercase? Or
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I feel like it makes me, I have done that in the past. Like, I write in my next book. I have a story about the kid who I was like forcing to let's play a card game. It'll be fun. We're gonna play Uno, because he had didn't recognize his numerals, and I was first year teacher and didn't understand basically I was looking at the academic goal, because that was the thing that we were being tested on for our funding.
And you were playing, so obviously this was the
we were playing, but just the way his
I have a similar response to
he's viewing school as a fun place to be. Can't wait to do 12 more years of this.
Right. And so that's where this damaged disposition hypothesis, I've heard it called in talks I've listened to from her. And I used to have there was a photo of her with that on the screen behind her, just saying the damaged disposition hypothesis with its definition, and now I can't find it. So if anybody has it, send it to me. But it comes from either this being really boring, and so they learn very early that school is boring, or they learn very early that they're bad at school because they're not ready for the things that we're expecting them to achieve.
And luckily, I think I taught that kid both. It's like, no, you have to play this game because you don't know your numerals.
Exactly. Well, I mean, so in the name of getting them ready for school, we teach them that school sucks and that you're not good at it, and teachers don't really like you.
I thought something else she said here was really interesting when she was talking about visiting a kindergarten that had a theme of teddy bears, and all the children were expected to show and tell about their teddy bears, count their teddy bears, measure them, weigh them, and make up stories. She says that such activities are probably not harmful and may even be fun in the short term. They're not intellectually engaging, stimulating, or provocative, but the idea of kind of like Mike and the Uno game, right? Like, might be fun, but it's in the short term if the child was interested, right? But it's so surface level, we're papering over it, and we're limiting them in ways that look good on paper when someone is even when someone is looking for play and engaged and interested, but we're not, because it's not coming from the children, it just isn't the same.
And I think I see people who, teachers sometimes when they first are going into more a play-based thing, what they'll get from it is the beginning part of they really like playing with these teddy bears.
And
then the part that they do, instead of saying, what do they like doing with the teddy bears?
Mm-hmm.
It's okay, so let's use that, and now let's do all the academic skills.
Right.
It goes back to rather than
we're using a toy instead of a worksheet. So
yes,
we're playing
but it's the worksheet. Yes.
Yeah.
We've done it, ladies and gentlemen. I think there's I want to be careful with how I say this, because I think I've encountered a lot, like you just mentioned, Liz, about the teddy bear thing. I've encountered a lot of that, of like, but we are playing. See, it's fun, or it's cute, or it's something that children like. But there isn't that deeper intellectual meaning there for the children. It's still kind of a replacement of, like you just said, Heather, the worksheet. But then I have found, this kind of relates back to the developmental stages of teachers. I found that it can be very hard to invite people into a conversation about that, because I don't know why. I think it's rude of me to assume why, but if I was going to guess, I would say like, okay, but their idea is, okay, but I've done all of this work and it is playing and you're just being a hater. And at that point, I'm like, I actually don't know how to respond anymore. That's why I'm not a coach. That's why I don't do admin. That's why I don't do that.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to figure out like what is the response to that, to when you have people who are like, well, we did teddy bears. So,
so
we know
play.
What play is. We know what learning through play is. Like,
Yeah. I mean, I would just ask, okay, tell me more about that.
Yeah. And
I think you don't have to have the answer.
Yeah. I'm thinking of Lisa Murphy's idea, and I think actually it was Dan Hodgins' first idea, but the verb.
Yeah.
Like, so not the object. What's the verb here? Yeah. So if they are
I think about that all the time. Yeah.
Holding the teddy bears like babies and putting them to sleep, then measuring doesn't really make sense, because kids go, oh, I'm taking care of my baby. I'm giving them a bottle. I'm putting them to sleep. I'm measuring them. I'm, whatever, naming the colors they're wearing.
That's what I do before I put any of my toddlers to bed.
Right.
Measure them.
But so I think that's the key, is the verb, not the noun.
Yeah.
And people generally take nouns first. Same thing. That's why Reggio is about baskets.
Yeah.
Not about the image of the child.
Yeah.
And like anything.
It's about wood.
Yes. Montessori is about hardwoods with pastel color, painted colors, whatever. It's because it's easy to think of the discrete bits of it's like the same as the academic. It's looking at these discrete things. I'll be okay, I'll go buy that, and now I'm Montessori, I'll buy that, I'm Reggio. And the intellectual piece is the whole, I forgot her exact wording, the whole mind. So it's like, oh, it's not about the thing, it's like, what are they doing? Let's step back. And that's why documentation can be really helpful.
Right.
And then it takes a little bit of like, okay, so what were you saying besides, okay, they named their colors.
Yeah.
What were they doing with it? Now, if you show them the photo, what are they going to do next?
Yeah.
If it was just naming colors, the kids aren't going to do anything next.
Right.
But if you show them the picture of them taking care of their babies, it's like, oh, we should make a crib for them. Or, you know what I mean? They'll like see a photo and they can go further.
Take another idea.
Academic skills, documentation doesn't really matter. It ends at, look, parents, they learned a thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's an element too of noticing as deeply as we can. So like I think about recently, like when I was at Purdue at the preschool, so 4-ish years ago, when I was a pretty good play person, teacher, whatever, observer, child-led person, I was watching one of my 4-year-olds just want to play with the train set all the time. And so I was like, oh, trains are really grabbing for her. So we did put lots of more train stuff in, and she wasn't at all interested in it. And so I had to go back and watch more, because she's still playing with the train set, but trains anywhere else in the room wasn't grabbing her. It was the connecting and disconnecting of the track. So that's an even like deeper train. And then, it's the verb, it's the connecting, it's the putting it together. It's figuring out why it won't stick together. So of course it's schema. But I think it takes practice, and it takes coming up with, here's what I think it might be, and maybe it works. And if it doesn't, we keep thinking about what it might be.
When I'm coaching, I tell people to slow down. Don't think you figured it out by watching them for a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. Sam.
I suppose too that so much of it is also that, particularly for teachers that were educated in the dominant American context, we were not taught to slow and look down at anything we were doing in 3rd grade or 5th grade or 8th grade. Like we were just, you know, being tested on our proficiency of memorizing dates and formulas. And it is somewhat natural to then, if you're in a teacher education program that isn't necessarily, I was going to say good, I'm not going to say that, isn't necessarily preparing you for this mindset, then of course you're going to fall back into what you know, which is, hey, if they like bears, I should have them measure the bears, and I should have them weigh the bears, and I should have them write stories about the bears, and then I've done it.
Yeah. Yeah. So we think we're doing project, but we're really still just doing themes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump into then the section where she starts to discuss short and long-term effects of early academic instruction. We've kind of touched on it in a couple of different spots. Mike, I think you were talking about like the letter of the week, and you know, for the next week they might be able to tell us everything we taught them about the letter, but in 8 weeks probably it's gone. And I think that kind of leads into what she's talking about here.
Yeah, for sure. And she references some sort of the way that school participation in the long term is actually diminished and things. And I know, I mean, more current research like Dale Ferran's stuff and like is great for that.
Yeah.
For me, now being, you know, having taught for as long as I have in mostly the same city or cities, I can actually get some of that information, you know what I mean? Like,
from the
so
schools.
there is a special ed teacher in Minneapolis who was a preschooler in my class, and what her classroom does, like she actually came and visited me a few years ago. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm a special ed teacher, and I was trying to figure out like what was it that you did, you know, and I looked up this stuff, you know, and so for that it was she looked up high school curriculum, like more specifically, but it was that idea of like, I want these kids to be playing. And then her other thing was that it was a multilingual room, and she spoke 2 of the languages that kids did, but there's others. So play also works in that way. And she was just like, if I can just observe and document the academic things I need for the IEPs and the, you know, all of that, I can focus on letting the kids interact with each other, get really excited about things. And so it was really neat to see that this is a person talking now 20 years later, 21 years later, about what happened and applying it to what she's doing. And I don't think anyone would have come to me, remember when we did the letter D? You did donut. I love donuts. You know what? I have not forgotten that donuts start with D. Like it just doesn't happen. But what she can say is, do you remember the pumper truck? Because she was part of the pumper truck investigation. And when we were pumping water, you know, through tubes with the little like lotion bottles connected to aquarium tubing, and watching it go through, and then going to see the real hoses, and you know, and like she can remember that to a certain degree. Not everyone's going to remember that. Yeah. But you don't know what's going to spark them, but it is something that they take with them. They don't take the little, do you remember when you made me hold my pencil like this? And every time I switched, you know, pushed my hand. And
I found that really meaningful and helpful.
Yeah, I found it really meaningful and helpful. And if anything, really the only thing people do remember is, you know, like if it was something awful, you know, like I can like one of my teachers talked about it. I can remember in preschool, you know, they threw something at another kid, and then the teacher grabbed their arm and dragged them across the room. Yeah, she remembers that.
Yeah, that's a damaged disposition. Yeah, for sure.
So it's just like, you know, the intellectual thing. I mean, so I'm talking more like just my own things, but obviously research also shows it, and that's where I think longitudinal, because we're talking about humans, longitudinal research is should be weighted more.
Right.
Than any short-term, anything that has only goes through 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Is not telling us information about a human.
Yeah.
It's talking about a skill.
So. Yeah, that's a good good way of phrasing the distinction, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it can be useful in a small way.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't take over from what we know about brain development, what we know about the Perry Preschool Project, the Bacterian, whatever that one's called.
Yeah. Yeah. Rebecca Markin
study. Yeah.
In her stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Like there isn't any research that shows that focusing on academics
and making kids sit still
helps anyone in high school, in going to college, in higher education levels, in anything.
Yeah. And it's so easy to throw around the idea that research supports that high quality early education has all these great, we've all talked about this before, all these great longitudinal, exciting results that we love or that we can benefit from or profit off of once they get to be grown-ups. But no one's pushing back and saying, okay, what exactly did they do in the programs that were researched every day with children? What was really happening? I guarantee you it was not turning 3-year-olds into 6-year-olds or trying, it wasn't focused on being still and compliant, and it wasn't drill and skill.
Louise Durbin Sparks talks about it.
Yes.
Now, because she was one of the teachers at the Perry Preschool Project.
The high scope curriculum hadn't even been invented yet.
Yep.
When
it
she
was
doing
4 teachers. Yeah.
Kids were leaving the center to walk home alone because the center was in their neighborhood. The program was in their neighborhood.
Yeah.
They were working deeply with families. It wasn't.
There was like an hour of home visiting.
Yeah.
And every week. Yeah. Maybe it was 2 hours.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Tiffany and I actually recorded about that.
Yeah, that's right.
That article. And Allison Ballas, if you're listening, we still want to record with you. Okay. She works with James Heckman, and she actually reached out. It's like, we'd love to talk about how the research is not used appropriately. Okay. Anyway, so there's that. The brain development piece of this is interesting to me too, because I've been writing and talking about this a lot lately, and just got this new book about what we're doing wrong with the brain's research, essentially, because people heard that maybe right around the same time Lilian Katz was writing, or this article, the original, this article, original date. You do what you want with those words so they make sense to you. The idea that all this development happens, and it happens so fast in this age range from birth to 3 or birth to 5. And so many people took that to be, we've got to cram more academic stuff in during those years then. Instead of saying, wait, what does that mean?
Metaphor at that point was,
what?
Whoever decided sponge was the appropriate metaphor for that period of brain development is on my list.
Yeah, no kidding.
They're gonna get got.
Why, Liz? Why don't you like sponge?
How much initiative do your sponges take, Heather?
And each droplet of water is one academic skill,
Right.
Also, it's very passive. I don't do anything.
Very passive. And she said that in the section on academic skills. It's a very passive way for children to spend their time and days. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do think Bruce Perry's idea of relate, regulate, reason is really helpful.
Okay.
And he's talking about it from a brain perspective. Relationships are the first thing. Birth to 18 months, that is like exactly when people talk about, like, I remember someone telling me, well, I don't want to be an infant teacher because I want to teach kids. It's like,
yes,
you are setting the foundation for everything by interacting with that child, smiling, responding to their needs, and, all of that. And it's just that idea of like, relationship, and it doesn't end. I just like, but that relationship, and then regulation, and really helping kids do that. And that's where social emotional learning, by taking it, separating it from it, which is doing the same thing as any of the academic skills. It's like, now it's not tied to a person anymore. And so it becomes about behavior management. But if you think about, no, we want kids to be regulated. So they have to be motivated, doing things they're interested in. The occupational therapist.
God, she's good.
Yeah.
Kelsey Olds.
Yeah. Like, right. Like, that's what they talk about too, is that you have to the way you
they're good. Sorry,
therapy is by giving them something they're motivated to do.
Yeah.
Like with the child I was talking about, the watercolors.
Yeah.
And then build from there.
Yeah. And you take it away when they don't do what you want them to. Oh, sorry.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. And then reason, then they think the letters and all that, because they're relating to people, they're regulated, and then they'll be motivated to do something. Right. And that, if you think of brain research that way, it's like, academic skills, especially with a child who's still working on regulation, that's not going to work. But intellectual, they can be involved in something intellectually at any level, even if they also need help regulating.
Right. Because regulating doesn't mean obedient, right? It's we hear self-regulation and it gets interpreted as compliance and obedience. Yeah. And that's not what you're talking about.
Yeah, regulation is, I can't remember who I learned this from, but from an OT for sure. But regulation is having the right activity level for the activity. So when you're out on the soccer field, you should be running, you should be yelling, you should be, and then when you go in for a nap, you should be chill.
That sounds like Greg Santucci to me. That sounds like that's where I got that from.
Yeah, that probably is actually. Yes.
Yeah. So I think I'm thinking about, as we're talking about all these ways of having an academic focus is different from really thinking about children's intellectual development and the deficit versus the competent, seeing the child coming to you with competency already. And I think one of the things that might be the hardest for someone who's hearing this, thinking about this for the first time, might be the other kind of cultural piece of at least the American childcare system, that we have to do everything as a group, and we have to do everything with all the children have to do all the things I plan. And so I can't stop and wonder and watch and learn about each individual child's, what's going to be meaningful for them. So how do we encourage someone who's feeling like, oh, that won't fit in my system because I have to do everything with everybody all together?
I feel like a first step is to actively work to break out of this capitalist managerial mindset of these are all of my little employees and all of my little employees must be productive. Like when you start to see parallels between possibly how you were taught classroom management in your teacher program and
or experienced it as an elementary school program teacher or student.
And then the old-timey factory looks like a lot of people will, like, you can see those parallels very, very clearly. And there's a lot to sit and pause about and to think, oh, is this how I want to be managed? Like, I think in a lot of ways, like, is it annoying that we have to imagine something happening to ourselves in order to empathize with a child about it? Yes, but sometimes that is kind of the only thing we've got. And I know
that's what will be meaningful for us.
Right. If that's what's going to be meaningful for us, then let's go. If relating it to yourself is what is best, then let's go for it. If you don't want your director giving you your schedule every day and expecting you to do exactly these things at exactly this time and exactly this way, why are you expecting children to do that? And if your answer comes down to because that's how I was taught, then I think we get into like some interesting developmental zones and some interesting conversations can start to happen of, well, do we want to do things just because we've always done them that way?
Some people would say yes to that though.
And I don't know what to do after that. And I'm like, okay.
Because of either, comfort level or that's really is what they want to do, or they just don't know how to do it any differently.
And then I think that's where, too. Okay, so how are your kids doing with that? Sorry, Mike.
No, you can go ahead.
Oh no, just bringing that back to, okay, so you're comfortable with this. How are your kids doing? And this is when you can bring it to quote unquote classroom management, if that's the lens they need to view it through. Like, how are your kids handling this particular style of your classroom? And what if they were able to take initiative, follow their own interests, work with appropriate independence?
Right. And so then that's where I was going to say the whole idea of like the room as another teacher, or however you want to say it, like, because if you've been doing this academic model, often the materials aren't there, or very little is there. So if the paint is only up in a cabinet, if most of the toys are not around, except the academic ones or whatever, then the children are going to be like trying to figure out, they are going to open up the teacher cabinets to get the things because they're not there. So it is partly the children need materials that they can self-start. So you want, labeling it helps so then they know where to find things, that organized in some way that they can find things. And then they do things, and therefore you can have them doing lots of different things. And if it's something that they chose themselves, they're much more likely to do it for longer, enter a flow state. So they're going to just be engaged. There will be times you still have to deal with conflict, but less so. And then you can be bopping around. I always use the metaphor of like the hummingbird, of go join kids for a little bit. Oh, wow. Tell me about what's happening here. Oh, look at that. Whatever, take some photos, whatever you need to do. And then go to someone else. And you can be that hummingbird, but it's only if there's flowers, using the metaphor, but if they have things to do, and there's some art activities over here. There's some sort of pretend play, figurines or dolls or stuffed animals, and there's blocks or other things to build with. And then kids find the things they need to do or want to do, sorry.
Sometimes it's need. I mean,
need from their perspective, not from the grown-ups.
We need them to do.
That's what I meant. So just that idea that if the more you can do that, then you can document what they're doing. Especially when you're not creating, because the other thing I think that happens is then you go on Pinterest, you find this cool thing, you cut out these different, print out some templates, you cut them out, you laminate them, and my God, it took me an hour and a half to do this. They better be doing this activity. Or you could just give them materials that they do, and that loose parts are a great way too, of like, you don't even have to spend money necessarily on things. I think certain things are worth
money.
Buying good blocks is worth it. Things like that. Good paint is worth it.
Materials that work, that do.
That work. But then
looking
other
at you,
things.
Rose Art.
I know exactly.
Oh my God. Right, but then you can have toilet paper tubes and empty yogurt tubs and all that because you got good paint.
Right.
And they can like attach things with tape and paint and then paint them or whatever. So, but just that idea that in some ways it is hard to get people started, because if they try to change one thing without the others, it's like, well, they just all fought over the 2 toys I have out. Or whatever, the markers.
I think one of the things that helped me answer this kind of a question was when I read Suzanne Axelson's book, and she dared to suggest that an adult-led, adult-planned activity could be play if children were free to leave. And I was like, okay, so I can still, if I have to have that adult-led plan thing, use as much as I can about what I know about the children to get it going. And if they're free to leave, then they have other things they can choose, the kind of environment you're describing, Mike. And so it still kind of looks like I'm being that teacher, but
it gives you information of, what would I do that would actually want that they'd want to come. Because there can be things like when we built that fire engine, they didn't spontaneously do it. I said, hey, we want to make something to show the parents. What should we make? And then we decided on just building a fire engine. What are we going to need? I went and got tin foil and whatever, different things after they told me what I should get. But I was initiating that part, but I wasn't telling them what to do then. It wasn't.
Right. And you didn't have it all pre-planned out. And
and I had no idea what the thing would look like. And it looked messy as hell. It looked like a bunch of Tupperware in those foil takeout containers with red tape, masking tape wrapped around it, and a giant 500 feet back sign on the back. So no one else would have known what it is. But showing all the photos of how we got to that point, all the parents knew exactly what it was. But it was a mess. I'm going to show it in the catalog. And sell it. Come buy your takeout containers.
Sell it as a kit on Teachers Pay Teachers. All right, we probably should wrap up because we've been going a little more than an hour, I think. But are there last things we need to get in here that you didn't get to say? Looking at you, Liz, because you're the one who waits quietly for people to stop talking. Just jumping it over people.
I've talked over Mike plenty this time.
Oh, okay. All right. Then. Looking at everybody else. What else do we need to say? Anything?
No, I do think your point of early formal instruction being more damaging to boys than girls is interesting in light of a lot of and I think there's a lot in the last, I don't know, 5 years coming out about how girls are now catching up and generally going to college at higher rates than boys, or even graduating high school at higher rates than boys.
Yeah.
And kind of trying to tease out why that is, or might be. And her idea of girls being culturally indoctrinated to be more passive and just accept the knowledge versus boys who are allowed to a certain point to be more active participants, or at least be excused from these, from engaging in the same way. But I also have several thoughts and opinions on how teachers are engaging with girls and boys when we're looking at education up, certainly until, if not through high school, as being a female dominated profession, and who's getting the attention and who's getting the care in this way as well.
And whose values are deciding what's important. But I was curious about that too, what you guys thought about that too. And Mike, from like a movement perspective, and the way that you, and even just the binary perspective.
Yeah. I think that's the thing, is when you're just sitting down, then it's like whoever's going to be more passive. And and as socialization changes, that might also change. The other thing too, I somehow, when you were talking, Liz, I thought of what we ask parents to do, like for involvement. Come on in and read to kids. Because that's our academic skill.
With kids,
and do a craft with kids. And then reading to kids, a person who's not used to reading to a group of preschoolers, like you need the other teachers to be there, like, just, being these two little Hitlers, like
crowd management,
the kids like down. And it's just like, wrong thing. That's right. Come in and take a photo of the pumper truck or whatever. Like, give them, they're doing something like, oh wow, this actually
intellectually engaging for the parent who's coming in.
Right. Although I had a person, I did one of my first investigations when I first discovered the Lilian Katz. We did a train investigation, and this guy came in who had helped create the map in New York, the transit map. Back in the mid-90s, they redid the map to combine Long Island Railroad, New Jersey, all that. And so he was excited and was just like, he was the train kid now as a grown-up. And he's explaining it, and the kids are watching. And in the middle of it, 5 kids, one kid started, but they went over and grabbed the train pieces and started putting together the train and driving the train around. And he was like, oh no, I've lost control.
Right.
It's like, you've just inspired these kids.
Yeah.
But he needed that. He needed me to tell him that, because he was just like, oh man, I'm really messing up. It's like, are you kidding? Like, you have just hand them a map and then talk to the other kids who want to listen.
To act on what you were saying to them.
Right. But it's like all of us need to be retrained in a way. And I think the other part about more women going to college is just that colleges are actually have changed culturally so that women are more welcome. That in terms of intellectual development, I don't think there's much difference. I think it's more like, oh, it turns out if we don't keep women out, actively keep them out of college, they
go to college.
Same thing is happening around race, right? Oh, it turns out there's plenty of people who can go to college. If we just, let them and address, any whatever other inequities or unfairness. Like, you can have any sort of name and still have your application, reviewed the same way or whatever, so
hopefully.
Anyways, that's
multifaceted.
I'm now getting way
that's a whole other episode. So I
love that she does use the word damaging right in the middle.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
that's bold.
It's like, because that's the part that for us, with our center, because we are asking donors who are like, oh, could we get this? And it's like, oh, we're doing a longitudinal study. We're going to let you know what's happening. We'll give you little things, but we want to see where these kids that just started with us in January are in 5th grade. And we know that that's going to be really where you see the difference. So anyways,
well, thank you. This was wonderful. So much fun. And thanks everybody for listening to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd.